Good evening, colleagues, faculty, administration, and our guests who have supported us throughout this journey. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. Over the summer, I intend to engage in some recreational reading and during that time, I will reread a book that I have read many times during periods of transition in my life. It's a book entitled Failure is Not an Option. It depicts the history of the space program, and it's written by a man named Eugene Kranz, who is one of the most important and well-known flight directors in NASA history. And while I am a bit of a geek about this and have read many books, I particularly like Kranz's book the best, because he writes from a more personal perspective. He's more emotional, and he writes in a way that you can actually feel the tension and the happiness and the stress and everything else that goes into traveling and discovery. And remember that this was the infancy of the space program, where the computers that we have in our pockets to run our cell phones probably took the size of a room back then. This was the new frontier. And when NASA announced that the space program was opening, engineers, computer programmers, and all sorts of scientists came to NASA in droves, and often they sent in an application and weren't even given an interview. They were given a job. And they were given a whopping salary, usually of around $6,000, which back then in early 60s was a lot of money. But one thing I learned about through reading this book was about leadership. Kranz is an incredible leader. He had a large group of people who worked for him in preparation for the launch, mission, and return of each flight. All who worked for him were well-educated, well-trained, and they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing and with whom they were doing it. And they knew the group that they worked it with. They knew each other's moves. They knew what they were thinking. And they needed to do that, as this often was a life and death situation. These groups included flight dynamics, navigation, computers, electronics, and everything else, just to name a few. These people were part of flight control known as the trench. They were the grunts who did the work, but they were the important people that did the work. Kranz allowed and trusted the people who worked with him on a mission to do their job. He relied on each one of their gifts and their ability to use their gifts and talents for the overall success of the mission. He believed firmly and led those who worked for him, and he worked with them on the foundations of mission control, which he really drove into each person. And that was to instill these qualities that were essential for professional excellence. Discipline, being able to follow as well as lead, knowing that we must master ourselves before we can master our task. Competence, there being no substitute for total preparation and complete dedication, for space will not tolerate careless or indifference. Confidence, believing in ourselves as well as others, knowing that we must master fear and hesitation before we can succeed. Responsibility, realizing that it cannot be shifted to others, for it belongs to each of us. We must answer for what we do or fail to do. Toughness, taking a stand where we must, to try again and again, even if it means following a more difficult path. Teamwork, respecting and utilizing the ability of others, realizing that we work toward a common goal, for success depends on the efforts of all. To always be aware that suddenly and unexpectedly, we may find ourselves in a role where our performance has the ultimate consequence. To realize that the greatest error is not to have tried and failed, but in that trying, we did not give our best effort. The passion of the early space program was fueled by the challenge that was given by a young visionary, a young leader, a young president by the name of John F. Kennedy, when he challenged that by the end of the decade, a man would be launched to the moon and brought back to the Earth safely. And in that process, we got to see our world in a different light. On Christmas Eve 1968, the astronauts of Apollo 8 took pictures and mapped the far side of the moon. And he orbited around so that other people could land there. And this was the longest and darkest part of the mission. It was dark, cold, and there was no radio contact back home. However, when the craft came around, they got to see the world, our Earth, from a different place that nobody has ever seen before. The good Earth, seen far away. And upon sending that picture back to Earth, Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders began to read from Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was. It was good. So as we step out into a new journey, there may be many lessons we can glean from our human history of discovery and those who led it, as well as those who worked in the trenches. It is my hope that, like our early discoverers, we will look in awe of a new world we are about to embark on. We look equally at awe at where we came from. We will lead with trust rather than control. Above all, we must never let the struggles of yesterday and the challenges of today overshadow our dreams and ambitions for tomorrow. May God order our steps and bless each one of us as we move bravely forward from this day. Amen.